All right, so in this video, there are going to be discussions from a YouTuber about the lore of Warhammer and talking about some of the video games. And I am just interested in sharing this with you. This is a reaction video, more or less. But there's a lot of things that are said in this video that are really, really well said. And I think they, as a newcomer to Warhammer, it is super helpful and insightful. So I want to start with that. And the other thing is, she talks about the Orcs. So I really like that she's talking about a specific faction and enemy type and kind of the lore and the background behind that. So it's a pretty entertaining video. She does a really, really good job presenting it. So stay tuned and enjoy the show. Welcome back, y'all. I have no idea why I just said it like that. It's not even how I talk. Anyways, welcome back. For those of you that are new here, my name is D Patriot. And I just love playing video games. And Space Marine 2 is a game that just struck a chord with me this year. It's a game that just overwhelmed me with pure and raw gameplay. It reminded me of games of the old days where they're just pure fun. You pick up the game, you blast through a bunch of enemies, you enjoy a bunch of locations, you go through a pretty damn good story, and then it's over. It's over, and then you can jump into various game modes. There's PvP, there's the co-op mode, so there's just a lot to happen with the operations as well. So you can have hundreds of hours of fun with this game. Anyways, I'm done talking. So the point is, we're going to do a reaction video today. And it's titled, This is a Rant About Warhammer 40K and Space Marine 2. So I'm not sure. This is a big time YouTuber. I'm not sure what she's going to say. I think we just watch this and go from there because I want to hear what somebody is going to take a stance and rant about. I'm very curious. Let's see if it's good or bad.
The God Emperor would not approve, and my excuses are, in fact, heretical. Personal stuff is what happens to people who are tainted by chaos. For the Emperor! It's hard being this cool. It's tough. I know you were wondering. In part because I've been reading Warhammer books since I was about 13 years old.
Really?
And so it's time I went on a rant. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I'm sick of people here on YouTube making videos about stuff they don't like and in a lot of cases don't even fucking know anything about. 10 videos on a game they haven't even played and have no intentions of playing. When they could instead be making videos in the name of the God Emperor about the state of Warhammer and how it's maybe one of the best video game franchises. Full stop. But we'll get to that. Today's video is half about why I think Warhammer is awesome in general and half sort of a ploy to attract people to Warhammer who are like maybe interested but don't really know where to start. Which brings us to a video that I don't really know where to start because Warhammer is very big and very good. First, if you've never really heard of Warhammer, let me give you a very brief welcome. Ooh. Warhammer is a tabletop miniature game, or it was. I mean, it still is, but that's how it started, and now it is so much more than that. Which is another thing about how goddamn cool Warhammer is. You don't like tabletop games? Okay. Cool. Here's a whole community for painting and building miniature figures, full of people who've never even played the game and are incredible artists. But say you're not really a painter, not really a thing.
I'm not.
No worries, bro. Here are literally hundreds of books with some of the most dense lore that you've ever read. Really, it is such a big world for you to get lost in. I personally have and do make the case that actually Warhammer is the densest fantasy universe that's ever existed, more so than Tolkien. You don't like books? Red flag. That's weird, but okay. We have like a whole YouTube ecosystem, a whole very fleshed out niche of YouTube Warhammer channels that you can fall asleep to or not while somebody takes you on the journey that is Warhammer 40k. And I only mention the sleep thing because I know some of the Warhammer lore channels intentionally speak in a specific way or show art in a specific way that is meant to lull you into sleep. Like it's like guided meditation.
Nice.
Warhammer sleep videos.
Nice.
And they're great. It's one of the most dense yet simultaneously most accessible franchises in existence. And honestly, what a blessing is that? How wonderful to have something so deep and so fulfilling and so eager for you to jump in. Warhammer does not gatekeep it.
First off, great that she's using her platform to talk about this and mention other content creators that she recommends for Warhammer and lore specifically, because that's going to help me and I'm sure other newcomers who have played Space Marine 2 and have now jumped into this universe because of that game. I feel like there's a lot of us. Yeah. So, okay, let's go.
Itself. If anything, Games Workshop, who make Warhammer, are maybe too eager to get your money however they possibly can. Yeah. They are certainly not a company that is immune from or even undeserving of criticism, but Warhammer is so cool that I think it continues to rule even beyond the constraints of its money-hungry human overlords, which is actually very Warhammer-coded. Ironic. Is that irony? Who knows? Who's to say? So. Nobody knows what that is. But really, basically, my point there is you can take as much or as little as you like. You can learn a new skill like painting, or you can read a bunch of books, or you can play a new game, or you can get a new hobby, or you can play a bunch of video games. All through the vessel that is Warhammer. Okay. That's great. Let me back up.
That it's
so
approachable.
Warhammer is a tabletop game
that.
series set in a science fiction fantasy future, and in the case of Warhammer 40k, which is mostly what I'm talking about today, set around the year 40,000 D. Technically, Warhammer and Warhammer 40k are two different things, but I am in a lot of cases talking about both things here. And sometimes just talking about 40k. This is already too complicated. I'm going to shut up about this. There are orcs, elves, space wizards, evil space magic, but technology and militia and mechanical functions as well. And it is a huge bummer of a setting and story. Warhammer is referred to as and uses the term grimdark to define its genre, and its setting basically has humans in a never-ending war against alien races. All human progress that is not in service of war has ceased, and virtually no good exists. The humans even know that. Like, they're not fighting to save humanity in the Warhammer universe. Yeah. They know that humanity doesn't stand a chance in the long run. They're just fighting to show how angry they are that everything sucks, and just delaying the end of the Imperium of Man, as mankind is basically called, for as long as possible. But they know they're screwed. It's very metal. If you'd really like to have a lore overview, I am not an expert in this, and frankly, I think it's very hard to call yourself an expert in Warhammer lore in general. I would direct you to my personal favorite Warhammer YouTuber, Luton09. I'll leave a link in the description. There are many to pick from, but he is my favorite. And while I do really encourage you to go check out Luton and just pick a video and dive into whatever part of Warhammer might interest you, let me tell you about my two favorite Warhammer lore tidbits to kick things off.
Yes, please.
Firstly, the orcs in Warhammer are, orcs. They're space orcs. They are the most successful and powerful race by a mile for a bunch of very fun reasons. They also don't just win and dominate everything, even though they are absolutely OP, for a bunch more fun reasons. Firstly, orcs completely asexual. They specifically reproduce like a fungus. They are war mushrooms. They release these fungus spores that grow underground, and they have this whole life cycle because things that grow into plants that then become orcs, and it's fully self-sustaining. So no matter where they are releasing this fungus at all times that is creating this generating ecosystem of orc production. They actually release the most fungus when they die, meaning that if you kill an orc, you've just made a bunch more orcs. Really? They're also so unbelievably self-sustaining that their medics, who are called pain boys with a Z, they're really dumb and use really outdated tech, but it kind of doesn't matter because orcs barely feel pain. You could also like decapitate an orc and put its head on another orc's body, and it would adapt and it would live just fine. They can survive virtually any injury. The only way to get rid of orcs once they've existed on a certain planet is to destroy the entire planet.
Sound like
all
a cockroach.
Life must be gone, otherwise orcs will live on forever. The infinite, self-sustaining, self-efficient war mushroom. All it does is war and reproduce and facilitate said war and reproduction.
Comments
that
on
was
this,
too
please.
OP, but wait, there's more.
I'm
not going to get too deep into how this functions right now because it's a lot, but orcs have like a collective psychic ability. When a bunch of them believe something to be true, it is. For example, if all orcs came together and at some point for some reason started to believe that mankind had been completely wiped out, that would be correct. All of mankind would be gone. They just haven't thought of that. Like, or they just don't believe that. So it's not true. A thing that they did succeed on, which is a really common example, is that they thought that if rockets had yellow flames painted on them, it would make them work better and cause bigger explosions. And so it does. If you paint a yellow flame on a rocket, it will explode bigger. Orcs are, in essence, the most formidable Warhammer race. They haven't changed in millions of years because they are considered to be biologically perfect organisms. They're also really stupid, and they don't know that. So they tend to just accidentally kill each other and fight a lot and die because all they consciously care about is fighting. It's incredible. Perfect organism. Too dumb to do anything with it.
Wow.
I love it. Second fun lore fact, which is such a funny thing to call fun by virtue of what it is, but there's something called the Adeptus Administratum, which is basically mankind's like future administrative division. It's like government or government admin, basically. Exciting stuff, I know. Thank you if you're still here. For the Emperor, am I right? It's basically the place where people do office stuff to make sure that the Imperium of Man continues to war effectively. And it is huge. There are billions of administrative staff members working for the Administratum, literally non-stop, no breaks at all. And they will do until they die, just to manage the Imperium. Many of them have never even been outside the Adeptus Administratum. They don't even really know what they're managing. It's basically every single thing you could think of that applies to government, all in this one contained unit. Find this incredibly rich, interesting gem of a thing. I just told you about the future version of government admin passionately.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Now, with a bunch of lore stuff said, I do have to tell you, and please don't be too scared of this, Warhammer does not have any official canon. Or rather, everything is canon. It's part of the appeal that some things may be true and some things may not be. Gav Thorpe, who was a game designer at Games Workshop from 1994 to 2008, and has written several Warhammer books called The Notion of Canon in Warhammer, a fact. It has hundreds of authors. There are thousands of stories. It is so big. There's so much of it, and there are occasional inconsistencies, but I really like the way they deal with them. The official explanation is that everything is official, but that all the stories that are being written aren't necessarily true or could be based on rumors or are coming from bad sources. It might be a legend of what actually happened or a rumor of what actually happened. Passed down until the truth was diluted, just like the things that happen in the Administratum. That's not to say that there aren't things that the community accepts as canon and characters that are accepted as canon. Like, that totally is a thing. Okay. It's just sort of a giant universe where they treat it as like a who's to say who's telling the truth. There are many books in the Warhammer universe. Some are bad, some are excellent. I'm giving you like the easiest, the popular pick, perfect. I think. Okay. I recommend Horus Rising. This is a book that begins telling a story of a particular era of Warhammer's Imperium of Man, where someone tried to overthrow the Emperor, his own son, in fact. There are 64 books, but I'm not telling you to read them all, and the timeline of the books becomes a nightmare kind of quickly, but just start with Horus Rising. I'll leave a link in the description. And you can either continue on that path, or you can find something or someone that you find interesting in that book and go on a path of your own completely. It's like choose your own adventure Warhammer universe.
It's very good.
My final recommendations are things that I put a lot of time into, and I think are probably just really easy for anyone watching this video to tackle. Warhammer 40k video games. I'm going to leave this video by giving you 5 very different but very solid Warhammer 40k video games.
Good way to end.
All of which are vastly different in genre. So I promise at least one of them will be up your alley if this is something that you want to dive into. And I'm only giving you 5 recent ones for the record. There are way more than just this, but
there's a lot of games.
Let's do it. First up, and most recently lauded, so it shouldn't be surprising, is Space Marine 2. Space Marine 2 is a very Gears of War-esque third-person shooter, which is an interesting sentence, because Gears of War is openly inspired by Warhammer. It has all the third-person shooter staples, but I think elevates every single one of them. You've got melee combat, but instead of just a button tap to smack somebody, it has this full hack-and-slash system, complete with timing-based parries or unblockable attacks you have to dodge roll away from. There's a Halo meets Doom-style health system, where if your armor breaks, you'll start losing health, which you can replenish via medkits, and the only way to get armor back is by performing executions. Basically, I think Space Marine 2 takes the best of a lot of games in its genre or similar genres and combines it all into one really impressive creative package. It didn't have to do all that. You could have just made me shoot some Tyranids, but it did, and I love it for that. Before playing it, I was worried Space Marine 2 would get a little repetitive, but I think it avoids that with diverse levels with giant and really pretty skyboxes. Genuinely, it is a stunning game. A tight campaign with a well-paced, simple but engaging story and some actually fun traversal sort of platforming segments. The campaign also has 4-player co-op, and there are a bunch of multiplayer modes which are continuing to be updated. It's very reminiscent of the 360 era of games, where it really feels like the team at Saber Interactive understood exactly what game they wanted to make and did it. It's not also an RPG or also an MMO like a lot of shooters are trying to be these days, but it's also not just a third-person shooter. Now, have you heard of Baldur's Gate 3?
Yes.
Well, that's not a Warhammer game, but Rogue Trader is. It is a lot like Baldur's 3 and, you know, many other games in the D&D style traditional CRPG genre, but it's set, of course, in the Warhammer universe. Made by developer Owlcat, Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader is genuinely very well written. The tone of this game is what really sells it for me. It is tonally maybe perfect. The setting is so well realized, and it has a big focus on player actions impacting the world around them. I feel like so many games claim to do that that phrase is almost meaningless at this point, but CRPGs do tend to do it very well, and Rogue Trader certainly does. People will tell you Rogue Trader has some probably needlessly complex systems, but I personally actually really like that. You may not, depends on your taste, but I'm a huge fan of the complexity of this game. Basically, it's a big, dense, 100-hour RPG that's very easy to get lost in, also featuring co-op multiplayer, which I love. Basically, if you like Baldur's Gate and you want to get into Warhammer, try Rogue Trader. Next up is one of the very few online multiplayer games I have consistently returned to over the past few years, Warhammer 40k Darktide. This is sort of a spin-off to the also popular and good Warhammer Vermintide series, which I'm not going to talk about as part of this list because there are too many Warhammer games and I don't have time to get to them all. Darktide is very Left 4 Dead-y in that it's a 4-player co-op game where you fight waves of AI-controlled enemies at levels with a bit of looter-shooter mixed in. You can fully customize your character, not only in appearance, both in the character creator, but also through unlocking new gear and equipment, but also with a full sort of Diablo-style skill tree. There are 4 different classes, a bunch of different maps, and have different mission styles, a crafting mechanic, optional objectives, fully active cutscenes, it goes on and on. Darktide did have a bit of a rough launch, technically speaking, but Fat Shark have done a very good job of fixing both issues and consistently providing new content. And while I could personally do without some of the MMO-style elements, it is a really sharp, fun co-op shooter. Legitimately some of the most fun multiplayer gaming experiences I've had in years. Yeah, Next up is Boltgun. Boltgun is a boomer shooter, basically meaning it's a lot like the original Doom, for example.
Take it out of full screen mode.
You guessed it, Warhammer. Here's a very nostalgic, arcadey art style with a whole lot of color that you can sprint right past thanks to its fast pace. It is, at its core, a really smooth arcadey shooter with some nice weapon variety, and again, like Doom, often has a correct weapon for a correct situation, which is a gameplay consideration I've personally always loved. While I think Auric Digital did a great job with their first ever shooter, it is worth noting that level design is this game's weak point. I almost want to tell you to play it to have boomer shooting fun, but with the caveat that I wouldn't judge you if you didn't finish it. I wasn't sure which game to end with because there are legitimately so many different genres. Do I go with orc-focused 2D action-adventure game Blood, Shooters, and Teeth, or American football-esque Blood Bowl, or positively reviewed turn-based tactic/strategy game Chaos Gate? No. Instead, I've decided to go with Power Wash Simulator. I love Power Wash Simulator. I finished the entire base game in which literally all you do is power wash stuff. That's it. I find it super meditative to jump into this game and power wash some dirty things. You just sit there and you power wash. And they've had some great DLC, including, you guessed it, Warhammer.
No.
The Power Wash Simulator Warhammer 40k special pack is just especially cool because what you're largely power washing are things that otherwise exist as miniature figures for the tabletop game. Their incorrect scale as though you were an adept, and it's set in the classic, very gothic, grim, dark halls of a temple. It's fun as a Warhammer fan because it's like getting to be a part of one of the more boring jobs that might exist in the Warhammer universe. Like, you're literally just a guy who power washes stuff, but it's also very cool to see a lot of the universe's intricate vehicles up close on a large scale. And again, so different to every other game on this list. Okay, this is a very dense video. I'm just hoping I can keep it under 30 minutes. Did I do that?
Great.
Let me know in the comments.
All right, so that was a good video. I appreciated what she had to say. I thought she did a phenomenal job until she got to Power Washing Simulator at the end. I kind of lost her there. But anyways, to each their own. But the point of the matter is there's a ton of lore, there's a ton of backstory, there's a ton of variety. And it has endured the test of time. This has been around for a long, long time. There are so many stories that have been out in existence. There are so many stories that are still being made. And the fact that she said it's kind of like an open sandbox as far as canon is concerned, please leave me some comments on that because I'm not really sure, exactly like what is accepted canon. She did kind of allude to it a little bit, but I'm a little bit confused on that. Space Marine 2 is my game of the year. That's what brought me into this sort of deep dive kind of experience where I'm going through and trying to find out information about the lore. And I know there's some other YouTubers and content creators that she actually talked about here that I need to look up to actually learn a little bit more about that. But ultimately, love this video. I thought she did a great job, and that's pretty much it. So expect some more videos from me, probably about Space Marine 2, more video game related content, and definitely once I start to learn lore, I can begin making videos and talking about it. But until that time, I really don't feel comfortable doing so. So thank you so much for watching. Leave as many comments as you can. I really appreciate reading them, especially if they're adding some lore or some information that you feel is important or that you actually care about. So thanks so much for watching. Again, I'm D Patriot. See you next time.